The dust-laden wind carried whispers of her arrival before Katherine Sinclair's wagon even rolled into Redemption Creek. A haunting silhouette against the blazing Arizona sunset of 1876, she appeared more apparition than woman to the wary townsfolk who gathered to witness the stranger's entrance. The rumors had preceded her by 3 days. A woman traveling alone, said to bring drought to crops and death to livestock, chased from 4 territories already. Katherine held her head high despite the hardships of her journey. At 25, her once fine dress was now travel-worn, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple arrangement beneath a practical bonnet. She had little left but her medical bag, a small trunk of possessions, and an unwavering determination to outrun the whispers that had followed her since her husband's mysterious death 2 years prior. "We don't want your kind here," a stout man called out as her wagon approached the town's only inn. "Heard what happened in Silver Springs." Katherine's knuckles whitened on the reins, but her expression remained calm. "I seek only shelter for the night, sir. I'm continuing west tomorrow." "Best you keep moving right on through," called another voice. "No room at the inn for witches." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering crowd. Katherine had expected as much. It was the same in every town since Sterling Falls, where her husband had died suddenly after 3 healthy horses in their stable had inexplicably perished overnight. Somehow, blame had fallen on her, the outsider from back east with knowledge of herbs and remedies. "That's enough," came a deep voice from the edge of the crowd. The sea of onlookers parted as Zachary Ryder strode forward, his spurs jingling with each purposeful step. At 30 years old, he cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. His dark hair curled beneath his Stetson, and his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, assessed Katherine with undisguised curiosity. "The lady said she's just passing through," Zachary continued, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "I reckon we can show a bit of Christian charity for one night." "You don't understand, Ryder," insisted the first man, whose name was Wilbur Thompson, the town's most prosperous merchant. "This woman brings misfortune. 3 towns have burned after she passed through. Cattle dead. Wells gone dry." Katherine's chin lifted. "Those are superstitious falsehoods, sir. I have brought harm to no one." Zachary's gaze hadn't left Katherine's face. There was something in her eyes, not fear, but a deep weariness that spoke of endless roads and countless rejections. "Madam, I own the Golden Spur Ranch just outside of town. Got a spare cabin that no one's using. You're welcome to stay there tonight instead." Gasps and mutters erupted from the crowd. "You're inviting trouble, Ryder," warned Thompson. Zachary smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. "Wouldn't be the first time." He turned back to Katherine. "What do you say, madam? It's quiet out there. No one to bother you." Katherine hesitated. She'd learned to be wary of men offering assistance, but something about this cowboy's direct gaze suggested honesty. "That's very kind, Mr. Ryder, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition. Been looking for a bit of company anyway." He tipped his hat. "Besides, seems to me you might be the blessing I've been waiting for. My foreman took a nasty fall yesterday. Cut's infected. I heard the barkeep mention you're handy with medicines." Katherine's eyes widened slightly at his words. Blessing. No one had called her that in years. Most people crossed themselves when she passed. "I do have some knowledge of treating wounds, yes." Then it settled. Zachary moved toward her wagon. "Follow me out to the ranch. It's about 3 miles east." As they left town, Katherine felt the burning stares of the townsfolk on her back. She'd become accustomed to such treatment, but it never ceased to sting. When they were well away from prying eyes, she allowed herself to study the broad back of the man riding ahead of her. "Why would you help me, Mr. Ryder?" she called over the creaking of her wagon wheels. "You heard what they said." Zachary slowed his horse to ride alongside her wagon. "My ma always said to judge folks by their actions, not rumors. Besides, I've never much cared what people in town think. That's an unusual position for a rancher. I'm an unusual rancher." His smile was brief, but genuine. "Got my land in a card game 5 years ago. Still learning the trade. Town's not quite accepted me either." Katherine nodded, understanding what it meant to be an outsider. "I appreciate your kindness, regardless of your reasons. Mind if I ask where you're headed?" "California," she answered. "I have a cousin in Sacramento who's offered me a place to stay." Zachary nodded thoughtfully. Long journey for a woman alone. I've managed thus far. Never said you couldn't. He gestured ahead where a large ranch house came into view, surrounded by several smaller buildings and corrals. Welcome to Golden Spur. The ranch was modest, but well-maintained. As they approached, several ranch hands paused in their work to watch their arrival. Katherine felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came with being scrutinized, but Zachary's casual demeanor seemed to reassure his men. The cabin's over yonder, he said, pointing to a small structure near a grove of cottonwood trees. It's simple but clean. My foreman, Eduardo, is in the bunkhouse. Would you mind taking a look at him after you've settled in? Of course. Katherine gathered her medical bag. I'll see to him right away. The bunkhouse was Spartan but tidy. On a lower bunk lay Eduardo, a middle-aged Mexican man with graying hair at his temples. His face was drawn with pain, and his right leg was wrapped in a blood-stained bandage. Senor Ryder, who is this? Eduardo asked weakly as they entered. This is Miss Sinclair. She knows medicine, Zachary explained, standing back to give Katherine room. Katherine approached the injured man with a gentle smile. May I see your wound, Mr. Eduardo? The foreman looked warily at Zachary, who nodded encouragingly. Reluctantly, Eduardo allowed Katherine to unwrap his bandage. The gash on his calf was angry and inflamed, with telltale red streaks beginning to spread upward. Katherine's expression remained calm, but internally she recognized the seriousness of the infection. How did this happen? She asked, carefully examining the wound. Barbed wire. Eduardo winced. 2 days ago. It was not so bad then. It's quite infected now, Katherine said, opening her bag. I'll need hot water, clean cloths, and whiskey if you have it. Zachary nodded and called for one of the ranch hands to bring the requested items. When they arrived, Katherine set to work with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound thoroughly before applying a poultice of herbs she had mixed from her supplies. This will draw out the infection, she explained as she worked. I'll leave you with more of this mixture. Apply it fresh twice daily and keep the wound clean. Eduardo, who had been tense when she began, visibly relaxed as her gentle hands worked. Gracias, señorita. It feels better already. After re-bandaging the wound, Katherine gave Eduardo a small bottle from her bag. 2 drops in water every 4 hours. It will help with the fever and pain. When they left the bunkhouse, the sun was beginning to set, painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. Zachary walked beside Katherine toward the guest cabin. That was impressive, he said. Eduardo's been in a bad way since yesterday. Doc from town couldn't come out till tomorrow. Katherine nodded. The infection was serious. If left untreated much longer, he might have lost the leg. Zachary whistled low. Then it seems my instincts were right. You are a blessing. Katherine stopped walking and turned to face him. Mr. Ryder, I should warn you. The rumors. They follow me wherever I go. Your reputation in town might suffer for helping me. Zachary considered her for a moment, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Miss Sinclair, this is my land. Only opinion that matters here is mine. He gestured toward the cabin. There's food in there and water for washing up. Join me for supper at the main house if you'd like, but no obligation. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and strode away, leaving Katherine to ponder the peculiar twist of fate that had brought her to Golden Spur Ranch. The cabin was indeed simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a small table with 2 chairs, and a pot-bellied stove. Katherine found bread, cheese, and dried fruit on the table, along with a pitcher of fresh water. After washing away the dust of travel, she debated whether to accept Zachary's dinner invitation. Caution suggested she should keep to herself, but something about the rancher's straightforward manner intrigued her. Decision made, she pinned her hair neatly and made her way to the main house just as twilight deepened. She hesitated at the door, then knocked firmly. Zachary answered almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting nearby. He'd shed his trail dust and changed into a clean shirt, his hair still damp from washing. Glad you came, he said, stepping back to let her enter. Hope you like venison stew. It's about all I can cook without burning. The main house was surprisingly cozy, with sturdy furniture and well-worn rugs. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the smell of cooking food filled the air. It was a bachelor's home, plain but comfortable. You live here alone? Katherine asked, accepting the chair he pulled out for her at the table. Just me and the hands, Zachary confirmed, bringing 2 bowls of steaming stew to the table. Had a housekeeper for a while, but she moved to Denver to live with her daughter last year. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the stew proving to be better than Zachary had suggested. Katherine found herself relaxing slightly, the first time she'd done so in a stranger's presence in years. "May I ask," Zachary said finally, "what happened to make folks spread such tales about you?" Katherine set down her spoon, considering how much to share. "My husband died suddenly 2 years ago. There had been incidents before his death. Animals dying mysteriously. Crops failing." She met his gaze steadily. "People needed someone to blame. And you were convenient," Zachary concluded. "I was different," she corrected. "I came from Boston. I had education, knowledge of medicines. In small towns, that's enough to make people suspicious. And your husband? What did he think of these accusations?" A shadow passed across Katherine's face. "Thomas was a good man, but weak. He began to doubt me near the end." Zachary studied her thoughtfully. "You don't strike me as a woman who brings misfortune, Miss Sinclair." "Katherine," she offered. "And you don't know me well enough to make that determination, Mr. Ryder." "Zach," he countered with a slight smile. "And I'm a fair judge of character. Had to be, to survive out here." Their conversation drifted to safer topics: the challenges of ranching, Katherine's journey west, the changing seasons. By the time they finished eating, Katherine realized she'd spoken more in one evening than she had in months of solitary travel. "I should return to my cabin," she said, rising from her chair. "Thank you for the meal and for your hospitality." Zachary walked her to the door. "How long were you planning to stay in these parts?" Katherine paused. "Just until morning. I should continue my journey." Something like disappointment flickered in Zachary's eyes. "Eduardo could use a few days of medical attention, and I'd be willing to pay you for your time." The offer was tempting. Katherine's funds were dwindling, and the road to Sacramento was long. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's a business arrangement," Zachary insisted. "You need money for your journey. I need someone with medical knowledge for my foreman and the other hands. Simple as that." Katherine hesitated, weighing the risks against the practical benefits. 3 days, she decided. "I'll stay 3 days to ensure Eduardo's recovery. Then I must continue on." Zachary's smile was warm in the lamplight. "Fair enough. Good night, Katherine." "Good night, Zach." As she walked back to her cabin under a canopy of stars, Katherine wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. Every time she had lingered in one place too long, the whispers had grown into shouts, and she'd been forced to flee. Yet something about Golden Spur Ranch and its owner made her want to believe that this time might be different. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. Katherine woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks. After dressing, she went immediately to check on Eduardo. She found him sitting up, color returned to his face, though the infection still needed careful monitoring. "The medicine helped much, Señorita," he told her gratefully. "The pain is less today." Katherine changed his bandage and applied fresh poultice. "The infection is responding well, but you must stay off this leg for at least another week." Eduardo grimaced. "Señor Ryder needs me. The cattle drive is coming soon. You'll be no use to him if you lose your leg," Katherine said firmly. "Rest now. Doctor's orders." As she left the bunkhouse, she nearly collided with Zachary, who was carrying a tray with coffee and biscuits. "Brought you breakfast," he said. "Thought you might be hungry after tending to Eduardo." The thoughtful gesture caught Katherine off guard. "Thank you. That's very kind." They sat on a bench outside the bunkhouse, sharing the simple meal as the ranch came to life around them. Ranch hands moved about their morning chores, horses nickered in the corral, and chickens scratched in the yard. "Eduardo is improving," Katherine reported, "but he needs complete rest for at least a week." Zachary nodded. "Whatever you think is best. I trust your judgment." Those 4 simple words, "I trust your judgment," affected Katherine more deeply than she would have expected. Trust was a commodity she'd been denied for so long. "I was wondering," Zachary continued, "if you might be willing to ride out with me today? Got some hands working the north pasture who could use looking at. Nothing serious, but cuts and scrapes that could use proper cleaning." Katherine considered the request. "I'm not much of a rider, I'm afraid." "Old Bessie's gentle as a lamb," Zachary assured her. "And it's only about an hour's ride." The prospect of seeing more of the ranch was appealing, and Katherine found herself nodding. Very well. Let me gather my supplies. An hour later, they were riding across the rolling grasslands that made up the bulk of Golden Spur's grazing land. Katherine had to admit that Bessie, the placid mare Zachary had saddled for her, was indeed gentle, plodding along with minimal guidance. How did you come to know so much about medicine? Zachary asked as they rode side by side. My father was a doctor in Boston, Katherine explained. I assisted him from a young age. He believed women could be physicians as well as men, though few shared his progressive views. Why didn't you become a doctor yourself? Katherine's expression grew distant. I wanted to. I applied to the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia, but then my father died suddenly. There was no money for my education. She adjusted her grip on the reins. I married Thomas instead. He was my father's clerk. Zachary absorbed this information thoughtfully. And now? Could you still pursue that dream? The question startled her. No one had asked about her dreams in years. I'm 25 years old, Mr. Ryder. Some would say that's too late to begin anew. Some would be wrong, he replied simply. Out here, folks reinvent themselves all the time. I was a gambler before I became a rancher. Katherine looked at him with new interest. A gambler? That explains the card game that won you this land. Zachary chuckled. Not my proudest moment, taking a man's ranch in a poker game. But in my defense, Gerald Fitzpatrick was gambling with money that wasn't his to lose. The bank was about to foreclose anyway. And you knew how to run a ranch? Not a clue, Zachary admitted with a laugh. Learned by doing. Made plenty of mistakes. Still do. But I found I had a knack for it. And more importantly, I found I loved it. The land, the animals, the rhythm of the seasons. His obvious passion for his adopted way of life was evident in his voice, and Katherine found herself smiling at his enthusiasm. They crested a small rise, and below them, several cowboys were working with a herd of cattle. Zachary raised his arm in greeting, and the men waved back. That's the crew I wanted you to check on, he explained. 3 of them were caught in a brush fire last week, trying to protect the herd. Burns mostly healed now, but I'd feel better if you looked them over. Katherine spent the next hour examining and treating the cowboys, who were initially wary but warmed to her quiet competence. Their burns were healing well, though one man had a persistent cough that concerned her. She left him with a herbal remedy and instructions to rest as much as possible. As they prepared to ride back to the ranch house, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon. Storm's coming, Zachary observed, frowning at the sky. We'd best hurry. They rode at a faster pace, but the storm moved more quickly than anticipated. When they were still a mile from the ranch, the skies opened, releasing a deluge that soaked them within minutes. There's a line shack just over that ridge, Zachary shouted over the thunder. We can wait it out there. The line shack was little more than a one-room shelter with a small stove, a narrow cot, and basic supplies for cowboys who needed to stay out with the herds. Zachary quickly built a fire in the stove, while Katherine wrung water from her skirts. Sorry about this, he said, handing her a rough blanket. Storm came up faster than I expected. Katherine wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, shivering slightly. It's not your fault. Nature has its own plans. They sat in awkward silence for a few minutes, listening to the rain pounding on the tin roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. Katherine was acutely aware of their isolation and proximity, though Zachary maintained a respectful distance. Tell me about Sacramento, he said finally. Your cousin there, are you close? Katherine hesitated. I haven't seen Eliza since we were children. She wrote to me after hearing of Thomas's death, offered me a place to stay until I could establish myself. And what will you do there? Practice medicine. Perhaps, if anyone will accept treatment from a woman. Katherine stared into the small fire. More likely I'll find work as a housekeeper or seamstress. Zachary frowned. Seems a waste of your talents. We don't always get to use our talents as we wish, Mr. Ryder. Back to Mr. Ryder, are we? He asked with a gentle smile. Katherine flushed slightly. Zach, then. That's better. He added another piece of wood to the stove. You know, Golden Spur could use someone with medical knowledge. Nearest doctor's a half-day's ride. Katherine looked up sharply. Are you offering me employment? Just thinking aloud, Zachary said casually, though his eyes were intent. Folks around here get hurt regular. Animals need tending too. Could be a place for someone with your skills. You forget the rumors that follow me, Katherine reminded him. Your men might accept me now, but once word spreads from town. My men trust my judgment, Zachary countered. And they've already seen what you can do for Eduardo. The rain began to slacken, and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds outside the small window. Katherine rose, setting aside the blanket. The storm is passing. We should return to the ranch. Zachary didn't press the matter, but as they rode back in companionable silence, Katherine found herself considering his words. The idea of staying in one place, of using her medical knowledge openly without fear, was tempting. But experience had taught her that acceptance was always temporary. The next 2 days passed quickly. Katherine divided her time between caring for Eduardo, whose leg was healing well, and tending to minor injuries and ailments among the other ranch hands. Word of her medical skill spread, and men who had initially been standoffish sought her out for treatment of long-ignored complaints. Zachary gave her space to work, but Katherine often felt his gaze following her across the yard. Each evening, she joined him for supper in the main house, their conversations growing more personal as mutual trust developed. On the afternoon of her 3rd day at Golden Spur, Katherine was organizing her medical supplies when a wagon arrived from town. A heavy-set woman climbed down, followed by a younger woman and a teenage boy. Katherine recognized the older woman as Mrs. Thompson, wife of the merchant who had warned against her presence. Zachary emerged from the barn to greet them. Mrs. Thompson, Miss Lewis, young James. What brings you out to Golden Spur today? Mrs. Thompson's gaze fell on Katherine, and her expression hardened. We came to warn you, Mr. Ryder. That woman is dangerous. Katherine's heart sank. So it began again, the accusations, the fear. Zachary's posture stiffened. Mrs. Thompson, Miss Sinclair is my guest. She's a witch, the teenage boy, James, blurted out. Pa says wherever she goes, bad things happen. James, that's enough, Zachary said firmly. By now, several ranch hands had gathered, watching the confrontation with interest. Mrs. Thompson drew herself up. 3 days after she arrived in Silver Springs, their mill burned down. In Cottonwood, livestock started dying. And in Morrow Creek, a child took ill the very day she rode through. Coincidences, Katherine said quietly, stepping forward. I have harmed no one. The whole town's talking, Mrs. Thompson continued as if Katherine hadn't spoken. They say you've been bewitched, Mr. Ryder. That she's using dark arts to cloud your judgment. Katherine watched the faces of the ranch hands, searching for signs that they believed these accusations. To her surprise, most looked skeptical rather than fearful. Mrs. Thompson, Zachary said, his voice dangerously calm. I appreciate your concern, but it's misplaced. Miss Sinclair is a healer. She's been tending to my injured men, including Eduardo, who might have lost his leg without her care. It's how they work. The younger woman, Miss Lewis, piped up. They heal at first, to gain trust. Then the misfortunes begin. Katherine felt a familiar despair washing over her. No matter what she did, how she behaved, the pattern always repeated. Soon the ranch hands would turn against her too, and she would be forced to leave. I think it's time for you folks to head back to town, Zachary said, his tone making it clear this was not a suggestion. Mrs. Thompson sniffed. We came out of Christian charity, Mr. Ryder, to save you from yourself. And I appreciate the thought, but not the execution. Zachary stepped closer to Katherine, a clear sign of where his allegiance lay. Now, I've got a ranch to run. Good day to you. The Thompson party departed reluctantly, Mrs. Thompson calling over her shoulder. Don't say we didn't warn you when your cattle start dying. As the wagon disappeared down the road, an uncomfortable silence fell over the ranch yard. Katherine felt the weight of everyone's stares and braced herself for the inevitable shift in their treatment of her. Instead, Eduardo hobbled forward on his crutch. Senor Ryder, I need Miss Sinclair to look at my leg. It is time for the medicine. His deliberate show of trust broke the tension. The ranch hands dispersed, returning to their tasks without comment on the visitor's accusations. Later that evening, as Katherine prepared to join Zachary for what would be their final supper together, she steeled herself for a difficult conversation. Her 3 days were up, and now the rumors had reached Golden Spur. It was time to move on, as she always did. Zachary was waiting on the porch when she approached, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He offered her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Eventful afternoon, he commented, gesturing for her to join him on the porch swing. Katherine sat, keeping a careful distance. Indeed. Mr. Ryder, Zach, I want to thank you for defending me today. Nothing to thank me for. Just told the truth as I see it. Nevertheless, I appreciate it. Katherine took a deep breath. As agreed, I've stayed 3 days. Eduardo is healing well, and I've left detailed instructions for his continued care. I'll be leaving in the morning. Zachary was silent for a long moment, staring out at the darkening landscape. That's your decision, of course, but I'd like you to consider staying on. Despite expecting this, Katherine was surprised by how much she wanted to accept. You heard what Mrs. Thompson said. The rumors will only grow worse. Let them talk. Zachary turned to face her fully. Katherine, in 3 days you've done more good for my men than the town doctor has in a year. They respect you. I respect you. Respect can turn to fear quickly, Katherine said softly. I've seen it happen too many times. Maybe in other places. Not here. Zachary set down his glass. This is my land. Anyone who works here answers to me, not to town gossip. And when your cattle start dying, when crops fail or fire strikes, who will they blame then? If those things happen, they happen because that's life in the West, not because of some imagined curse. Zachary's voice was firm. Besides, I'm not offering charity. I'm offering fair employment. The ranch needs someone with your skills. Katherine searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hidden agenda. She found only sincerity and something else, a warmth that made her pulse quicken slightly. I can offer you a place here, Katherine, Zachary continued. A purpose, and protection from those who would harm you based on superstition. The temptation was almost overwhelming. After years of running, the prospect of stopping, of belonging somewhere, pulled at her deeply. May I have the night to consider? She asked finally. Zachary nodded. Of course. No matter what you decide, know that you've been a blessing to Golden Spur, whatever others might say. There it was again, blessing. The words settled around her like a warm cloak, pushing back the chill of curse that had followed her for so long. That night, Katherine lay awake in the small cabin, weighing her options. Continue to Sacramento, to a cousin she barely knew in an uncertain future? Or stay at Golden Spur, using her medical knowledge openly, under Zachary Ryder's protection? And what of Zachary himself? Katherine couldn't deny the growing attraction between them. He was unlike any man she'd known, direct, honest, unafraid to stand against popular opinion. But was she ready to risk her heart again, after Thomas's betrayal? As dawn broke, Katherine made her decision. She packed her belongings methodically, leaving out only what she would need for the day. Then she walked to the main house, where she found Zachary already up, drinking coffee on the porch. He rose when he saw her, his expression carefully neutral. Good morning, Katherine. Good morning. She clasped her hands together to stop them from trembling. I've made my decision. Zachary waited, not pushing her to continue. I'll stay, Katherine said finally. For 1 month. A trial period for both of us. If at the end of that time, you still want me here and I still wish to stay, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement. The smile that broke across Zachary's face was like sunrise. That's fair. More than fair. He extended his hand. Welcome to Golden Spur, Miss Sinclair. Katherine took his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and the gentle strength in his grip. Thank you, Mr. Ryder. That handshake marked the beginning of Katherine's new life at Golden Spur Ranch. Word of her permanent presence spread quickly through the ranch and into town. Some townsfolk refused to do business with Zachary as a result, but most were pragmatic enough to separate superstition from commerce. Katherine established a small infirmary in one of the unused outbuildings, stocking it with her own supplies and additional medicines Zachary ordered from Denver. She treated the ranch hands, their families, and eventually, as her reputation for healing grew, even some of the more open-minded townsfolk who came seeking help when the town doctor was unavailable or ineffective. Throughout those first weeks, Katherine maintained a professional distance from Zachary, despite their growing friendship. She was still wary of the feelings he stirred in her, and conscious of how her presence might affect his standing in the community. A month passed, then two. Summer ripened into early autumn, bringing with it the busiest season on the ranch. Katherine found herself fully integrated into ranch life, rising before dawn to prepare remedies, checking on patients throughout the day, and often joining the hands for meals in the cookhouse. On a crisp October morning, Katherine was gathering herbs from the small garden she'd started when Zachary found her. He looked troubled, his usual easy manner replaced by tension. "Is something wrong?" Katherine asked, setting aside her basket. "Cattle are sick," he said without preamble. "About a dozen so far, in the north pasture." Katherine's stomach clenched. "What symptoms?" "Weakness, foaming at the mouth. 2 have died already." It was what she had feared would eventually happen, a natural misfortune that would be attributed to her curse. She straightened her shoulders. "Show me." They rode to the north pasture, where several cowboys were separating the sick animals from the healthy ones. Katherine dismounted and approached the nearest affected steer, observing its labored breathing and the froth around its mouth. "How long have they been like this?" she asked, examining the animal's eyes and gums. "Noticed it yesterday evening," replied one of the hands, a man named Pete. "More this morning." Katherine walked the pasture, studying the ground and the available vegetation. Near a small creek that ran through the property, she found what she was looking for, a patch of white snakeroot growing abundantly. "Here's your culprit," she called to Zachary, pointing to the plants. "White snakeroot. It's poisonous to cattle. They eat it, then they get milk sickness." Zachary frowned. "Never had a problem with it before. It thrives after wet summers, and we had heavy rains in August," Katherine explained. "You'll need to keep the cattle away from this entire area and clear out all these plants." For the next several days, Katherine worked alongside the ranch hands to treat the affected cattle and remove the poisonous plants. Many of the sick animals recovered with proper care, though several more died despite their efforts. As she had feared, whispers began in town that Katherine's curse had finally manifested at Golden Spur. But to her surprise, the ranch hands defended her vigorously, explaining to anyone who would listen about the white snakeroot and how Miss Sinclair had identified the problem and saved most of the herd. One evening, after a long day of treating the remaining sick cattle, Katherine returned to her cabin to find a small vase of wildflowers on her table. Beside it was a note in Zachary's bold handwriting. "Join me for supper? We have something to celebrate." Curious, Katherine cleaned up and made her way to the main house. Zachary greeted her with unusual formality, ushering her into the dining room where the table was set with the good china he normally reserved for important visitors. "What are we celebrating?" Katherine asked as he held her chair. Zachary's eyes twinkled. "2 things. First, the cattle crisis is officially over. No new cases in 3 days." "That is good news," Katherine agreed, touched that he considered this cause for celebration. "Second," he continued, pouring wine into her glass, "it's been exactly 3 months since you agreed to stay at Golden Spur." Katherine blinked in surprise. She had lost track of the time, so fully had she integrated into life at the ranch. 3 months already?" "3 months," Zachary confirmed. "Our trial period ended 2 months ago, but I figured why disturb a good thing." His expression grew more serious. "But I think it's time we discussed that more permanent arrangement we talked about." Katherine felt a flutter of nervousness. "Yes, I suppose it is." Zachary set down his wine glass and reached across the table to take her hand. "Katherine, these have been the best 3 months of my life. You've brought healing to this ranch in more ways than just medicine." "Zach, please, let me finish." His grip tightened slightly. "I know you came here running from something, from accusations and fear. I hope you found safety here, and purpose. But I want to offer you something more." Katherine's heart began to race. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when they called you cursed and turned you away, I knew right away you were the blessing I'd been waiting for." Zachary's eyes held hers steadily. "I'm asking if you'd consider making Golden Spur your permanent home as my wife." The words hung in the air between them. Katherine stared at him, a tumult of emotions washing through her: joy, fear, hope, hesitation. "Zach, the rumors haven't gone away," she said softly. "Marriage to me could damage your standing permanently. Do I look like a man who cares about standing?" Zachary smiled. "Katherine, I love you. I think I've loved you since I saw you holding your head high against those fools in town your first day here." Love. The word felt foreign on her tongue. After Thomas's betrayal, she had walled off that part of her heart. "Yes, love." Zachary's voice was firm. "And if you don't feel the same, I'll understand. You can still stay on as the ranch's healer. Nothing would change. But things had already changed, Katherine realized. Somewhere during those 3 months of working side by side, of shared meals and conversations, of challenges overcome together, her carefully constructed walls had crumbled. She had fallen in love with Zachary Ryder, his integrity, his kindness, his unwavering support. "I do feel the same," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm afraid, Zach. Afraid that someday you'll regret tying yourself to a woman people call cursed." Zachary rose from his chair and came around the table, kneeling beside her. "The only curse would be living without you, Katherine. You're not bringing misfortune, you're bringing healing and light." He took both her hands in his. "Marry me. Be my wife. Be Golden Spur's healer. Be whatever else you want to be. We'll face whatever comes together." Tears filled Katherine's eyes as years of loneliness and rejection collided with the hope of a future with this man who saw her true self. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I'll marry you." Zachary's face lit with joy. He stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Their first kiss was tender, a promise of the love they would build together. News of their engagement spread quickly. As expected, reactions were mixed. The ranch hands celebrated wholeheartedly, having come to respect and even depend on Katherine's medical skills. In town, opinions were divided, with some predicting disaster for Golden Spur Ranch and others adopting a wait-and-see attitude. A week after their engagement, Katherine was sorting through medical supplies when she heard a commotion in the yard. Looking out, she saw a fine carriage had arrived, and a well-dressed older woman was descending with the help of a driver. Katherine stepped outside, curious about the visitor. Zachary was away, checking on the herds in the south pasture, and wouldn't return until evening. The woman spotted Katherine and walked directly toward her. "Are you Katherine Sinclair?" she asked, her accent marking her as from back east. "I am," Katherine confirmed warily. "And you are?" "Margaret Holloway." The woman studied Katherine intently. "I believe you knew my son, Thomas." Katherine felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. "Mrs. Holloway?" "Thomas's mother." "The same." The older woman's expression was unreadable. "May we speak privately?" Still in shock, Katherine led Mrs. Holloway to her cabin. Once inside, she offered the woman tea, which was politely declined. "I've been searching for you for nearly 2 years, Miss Sinclair," Mrs. Holloway said, seating herself primly on one of the chairs. "Ever since Thomas's death." Katherine remained standing, tension radiating through her body. "May I ask why?" "To apologize." The words were unexpected enough that Katherine sank onto the edge of the bed. Mrs. Holloway continued, "And to clear your name, if possible." "I don't understand." Mrs. Holloway sighed deeply. "After Thomas died, I found his journal. He confessed everything, Katherine. How he had been embezzling from your father's practice for years. How he feared you were beginning to suspect. How he deliberately started the rumors about you being bad luck to discredit you if you ever accused him." Katherine stared at the older woman, unable to process what she was hearing. "Thomas started the rumors?" "He poisoned your horses himself," Mrs. Holloway confirmed, her voice thick with shame. "Spread stories among the servants that you practiced witchcraft. When he died of heart failure, a condition he inherited from his father, by the way the rumors he had planted took on a life of their own." Tears filled Katherine's eyes as the truth of her husband's betrayal sank in. All this time, all the running and rejection, stemmed from Thomas's fear of being exposed as a thief. "Why tell me this now?" she asked when she could finally speak. "Because I followed your trail west, trying to make amends. In Cottonwood, they told me you had come this way." Mrs. Holloway reached into her reticule and withdrew a folded document. "This is Thomas's journal. And this," she added, producing a second document, "is a letter I have had published in newspapers across the territories, explaining the truth and clearing your name." Katherine accepted the items with trembling hands. "I don't know what to say. You need say nothing. The fault was my son's, and by extension, mine, for not raising him to be a better man." Mrs. Holloway stood. "I understand you are to be married soon. I wish you every happiness, Miss Sinclair. You deserve it after all you've endured." After Mrs. Holloway departed, Katherine sat for a long time reading Thomas's journal, the full extent of his deception unfolding before her eyes. When Zachary returned that evening, he found her still there, surrounded by the pages of her past. "Katherine," he called softly from the doorway. The hand said a fine carriage came today. Through tears, Katherine explained Mrs. Holloway's visit and the truth she had revealed. Zachary listened without interruption, his face darkening with anger at what Thomas had done, then softening with compassion for Katherine's suffering. So you see, Katherine concluded, I was never cursed, just the victim of a desperate man's scheme. Zachary gathered her into his arms. I never believed you were cursed, Katherine, but I'm thankful the truth has come out. Maybe now you can truly leave the past behind. In the weeks that followed, copies of Mrs. Holloway's published letter reached Redemption Creek. The revelation that Katherine's curse was nothing more than a vindictive fabrication caused a sensation, with many who had shunned her now expressing shame and regret. Katherine accepted their apologies graciously but maintained a certain distance from town affairs. Her life was at Golden Spur now, preparing for her wedding and expanding her medical practice to include neighboring ranches. On a bright November day, Katherine Sinclair married Zachary Ryder in a simple ceremony at the ranch. The celebration that followed brought together ranch hands, reformed townsfolk, and even a few of Katherine's patients from outlying areas who had come to depend on her skills. As twilight fell, the newlyweds slipped away from the festivities to the ridge overlooking the ranch. Golden Spur stretched before them, bathed in the last light of day, a kingdom they would build together. Happy, Mrs. Ryder? Zachary asked, his arm around her waist. Katherine leaned into his embrace. Happier than I ever imagined possible. Any regrets about not continuing to Sacramento? She shook her head. None. This is where I was meant to be. She turned in his arms to face him. You know, when you first called me a blessing that day in town, I thought you were mocking me. Zachary brushed a strand of hair from her face. I meant every word. You are a blessing, Katherine. To me, to this ranch, to everyone you heal with your knowledge and your kindness. And you're mine, she whispered. The man who saw truth when others saw only superstition. Their kiss was a promise of the life they would share, a life that would have its challenges but would be built on the foundation of mutual respect and unwavering love. 5 years passed, bringing changes to Golden Spur Ranch. Under Zachary and Katherine's combined management, the ranch prospered, expanding its operations and its reputation for quality cattle. Katherine's medical practice grew as well, evolving from a simple infirmary to a proper clinic that served the needs of ranchers and townsfolk alike. The town of Redemption Creek had changed too. The old prejudices against Katherine had faded, replaced by respect for her medical skill and admiration for the way she and Zachary had transformed Golden Spur into one of the most successful operations in the territory. On a summer evening in 1881, Katherine sat on the porch of the main house, watching her 4-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, playing with wooden horses in the yard. Inside, Zachary was putting their 2-year-old son, James, to bed after an exciting day of helping his father with ranch chores. As the sun set over the land they had made their own, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened widow fleeing false accusations to a respected healer, wife, and mother, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined that fateful day when Zachary Ryder had first stood up for her. The sound of boots on the porch steps drew her attention. Zachary emerged from the house, his face still handsome despite the lines that years of sun and responsibility had etched around his eyes and mouth. He sat beside her on the swing, taking her hand in his as they watched their daughters play. Eduardo says the south pasture is ready for the new herd, he reported. And Doc Wilson from town stopped by the clinic. Says he's thinking of retiring next year and wanted to know if you'd consider taking over his practice officially. Katherine smiled. After all these years, I might finally become the doctor my father wanted me to be. You already are, Zachary assured her. With or without the formal title. They sat in companionable silence as twilight deepened. Elizabeth eventually tired of her game and climbed into Katherine's lap, her small head nodding with fatigue. I was thinking, Zachary said as he gently stroked his daughter's hair, about that day we met. Do you remember what I said to Thompson and the others? Katherine nodded. You said I was the blessing you had been waiting for. Best words I ever spoke, Zachary declared. And truer with each passing day. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Katherine leaned her head on her husband's shoulder, surrounded by the family and home they had created together. The whispers of curse had long since faded, replaced by the enduring truth that Zachary had recognized from the beginning that sometimes, what others fear most is exactly the blessing they need. In the years that followed, the story of Katherine and Zachary Ryder became something of a legend in Redemption Creek, a testament to the power of seeing beyond prejudice to the truth of a person's heart. And when travelers passed through, locals would sometimes point to the thriving Golden Spur Ranch and tell them about the woman they had once called cursed, who had become one of their greatest blessings.